Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. We will get started in just about 1 minute. I am now sharing my screen. Hopefully you guys can see it. If you're having trouble seeing my screen, go ahead and just either submit a question or enter something in the chat window. We'll wait 1 or 2 more minutes for people to join, and then we'll get started. Thank you. Okay, hello everyone. We are going to get started now. Thank you very much for everyone's time, and thank you for attending. I have presented one of these webinars in the past, and it went over pretty well. And so today I'm going to give a slightly different version of that presentation. But by all means, we'll do Q&A at the end, and I'll try to answer the questions that you guys have. So I am assuming that everyone can hear me. I did get a couple responses in the chat window, so I think people can see my slides and you can hear me. So let me get started. So this webinar is about cnMatrix. cnMatrix is what Cambium has branded, our product portfolio. It's a portfolio of Ethernet switches. So I'm going to give you an overview of these switches and go a little bit deeper in some areas. So let's just get started here. The next slide is kind of a high-level view of our long-term strategy. So, I joined Cambium about a little over a year and a half ago now. It seems like just a couple months. It's gone by very fast, but we spent the first 6 months, figuring out the requirements for these switches, and we ended up with 3 different use cases that we wanted to go after, or 3 different deployment scenarios. And this slide kind of summarizes that. The first deployment scenario is for the enterprise indoor access space. So these switches are targeted at the edge of an enterprise network or the access layer of an enterprise network. I won't speak about it here because this deck really focuses on this switch. But we are, let's see, last time I spoke to everyone, I don't think we were shipping yet. We are shipping now. We started shipping units as of November 30th last year, so it's been just a little over 60 days that we've been shipping. There are 4 models, and I'll talk about that more later throughout this deck. So the next deployment scenario, or the next use case that we're going after, it requires a different switch. We can't use one switch for both scenarios. The requirements are different enough. And I'll give you a quick overview of this switch. But for fixed wireless space, where Cambium's technology, and we're thinking about building. We are building. The design has been launched. We are building an 8-port version, a 16-port version, and a 24-port version. So on the enterprise SKUs, we only have 8 and 24. Here we also have a 16-port SKU. I feel that's going to be something for the end customers. We have multiple versions of these switches. Some will be AC powered, and these switches will come with the Cambium GPS sync. So that's integrated into these switches. Now we will have versions without the Cambium sync, as well as versions with the Cambium sync from a cost point of view. So the PoE power budget, we will have a PoE power budget to satisfy Medusa, 90 watts per port. So like 8 ports, 16 ports, 24 ports. For example, on the 24-port model, you won't be able to plug in 24 Medusas. I think it's going to be able to support up to 8 or 12 Medusas. But also, we'll also have versions with lower PoE power budgets to keep cost under control. For example, in an EPMP space or a non-Medusa space where you don't need as much power. Another aspect of these WISP switches is we'll have an extended temperature range. These are not outdoor rated switches. For example, you can't mount these out on the top of the tower in the rain and snow and ice and desert. They are designed to go inside of an enclosure. However, after saying that, we are looking into building an IP67 rated WISP switch as well, but that's farther out, right? So for now, we're focused on these switches. And up here I have, I say 2019, it's going to be towards the end of 2019. Third family of switches, again, we can't reuse the other switches. It's going to be its own switch. So this is the third family of switches going after this third deployment scenario. And this is for outdoor video surveillance and or like smart city type deployments. Now these switches are fully hardened, fully weathered, IP67. They can be mounted directly outdoors. The thought is, you want to cover a certain area with video surveillance. So let's say on a light pole, you would mount one of these switches. On that same light pole, you would use a Cambium subscriber module for providing connectivity to that pole. And then on that pole, the customer can deploy whatever he would like. We're envisioning 1 or 2 video surveillance cameras, maybe an outdoor access point type of deployment. So it's IP67. This first version is going to be AC powered. We have plans to do other versions that will be DC powered for solar type applications. This first version will have 4 1 GE ports. All 4 ports support 802.3 active PoE. One of the ports will also support the Cambium 30-volt passive PoE, and that's for connecting in the subscriber module. So these are the kind of a high-level view here, but these are the 3 families of switches going after 3 different use cases that we're going to be working on. Now, these are families of switches. We are going to be building additional switches over time to evolve these families. For example, on the enterprise switch family, we're going to be introducing a 48-port SKU. That switch is already in design. We're going to be introducing a multi-gig switch as well, supporting 2.5 gig. And I'll talk more about this later in the slide deck. One comment on this is that cnMatrix is a differentiator, I feel, for Cambium and for cnMatrix. So these switches are and can be cloud managed with cnMatrix. So all the functionality that you are used to with the other Cambium products, you get that same cnMatrix functionality with all 3 of these switch families. Okay, moving on to the next slide. I wasn't sure if I should include this slide, but a little bit about our naming convention. So here on the left, you see our cnMatrix enterprise use. There's 4 of them. So EX 2020. So each one of those characters actually means something, and let me quickly explain that to you. So the EX that stands for enterprise. When we come out with our WISP switches, for WISP or maybe something like that, but that was sense. It's the family of things we have. The A carries a 2 in the 2028 case. 2, that is the segment of this enterprise access space that we're going after. It's not the low end SMB. It's not the high end. It's the mid space that we're going after, and that's what that 2 represents. We will come out with the higher end family of switches, and that would be the EX3028, let's say. So we change that 2 to a 3. That higher end switch, it might have dual removable power supplies. The switches that we're shipping today, there's one internal fixed power supply. It's more money for dual removable redundant power supplies. But anyway, that's the EX3K line, and that will eventually come out as well. So anyway, so that first character, the A, is 2. That's the market segment that we're going after. The second character is the generation of the switch. So this is our first generation, so it's a 0. We're going to evolve with the silicon that comes out. So as the silicon improves over time, we will come out with the exact same switch, but with improved silicon, with improved capabilities, possibly at lower prices over time. So maybe 2-3 years from now, instead of an EX2028, we'll have an EX2128, that type of thing. The next 2 digits, the C and D here, that's the number of physical ports. So I keep referring to these switches as 24 ports or 8 ports. That's the number of 1 gig access ports. We also have, in the 24 port switch case, we have 4 fiber uplinks. Those are SFP plus or 10 gig fiber uplinks. So anyway, so the 4 plus the 24, that's 28 active. They can all be active at the same time. So 28 active ports. So that's why it's the 2028. And then the dash P, maybe it's obvious, but that means that that switch supports PoE. I have, there is a digit that we're currently not using. That's the Y in my example here. And we'll use that for future switches. An example is, I mentioned that we're going to be coming out with a multi-gig switch supporting the 802.3 BZ standard. So that supports 2.5 gig and or 5 gig. Anyway, so we would add in a M in that case for multi-gig. Here's some examples. Here are the switches that we're already shipping, the EX2028, EX2010, a 48 port switch that we are working on, EX2052. So the 52, that's 48 1 gig ports plus 4 10 gig ports. The EX2022M, that's an example, and that means some of those ports will support the 2.5 gig. And then the 3028, I mentioned that earlier, at higher the access. Another example, the TX2028, this is going to be a WISP switch. Another example, the VX2004, that's going to be the branding of our a high level overview of our branding and name convention. These are the switches that we're currently shipping, and I'm going to focus the rest of today on these switches here. These are the 4 switches, live picture of them. I like this picture, so I use it a lot. But this is the EX2K family, is what I talk about, and I'll go over some of the hardware with you guys. Maybe this is a review for some of you, and maybe it's new for others. So first question I get when I talk to people is they ask me if this is an OEM switch, and it is not. There's nothing wrong with the OEM model. You can go to China or Taiwan, you can find a switch that meets your requirements, or click software for a little bit, put your name on it, and voila, you have an Ethernet switch. We did not follow that model. So the hardware and the software is designed and owned by Cambium. for our hardware strategy, you know, we chose a silicon-based switching solution, and that really enables us to do a very feature-rich box. It's the dedicated hardware for the data plane enables us to do line rate processing of not only L2 switching, but also for L3 switching. So non-blocking switch. It also gives us some very rich L2 and L3 functionality, extensive QoS capabilities, ACLs, and filtering. 4 models available. I reviewed these with you guys earlier, but there's 24-port, 8-port, and then PoE version of each, and a non-PoE version of each. Again, the 24-port has 4 10-gig fiber ports. The 8-port has 2 1-gig. On the base plate, we have a USB port for a USB stick for file management. You can upload or download config files, error files, image files, and so on. Another thing that this port is commonly used for is for charging people's cell phones. So when you're in the wiring closet doing whatever you're doing, you can charge your cell phone with the USB port. A little side benefit there. We do have a true out-of-band network management port. So this out-of-band network management port, if the customer uses it, can be used to access the switch if the main network goes down for any reason.
People are having a hard time hearing you.
Okay.
Try dialing in from your phone.
Yes. Thanks. Hey, I just heard that my audio is not coming across very well, so I'm going to switch over to my phone, and hopefully that will be better. Give me 1 minute, please.
Okay. All right. I'm back on a different audio. I'm hoping that's going to be better for everyone. Maybe someone can put something in the chat window and let me know that you can hear me okay. I appreciate the input. Thanks a lot. Now, how bad was it in the beginning? Should I start over, or I guess I'll just continue, and then during the Q&A period we can touch on anything that you missed. All right, here we go. So I am back on this slide reviewing the hardware. Talked about how this is not an OEM switch, custom design, Cambium designed for the hardware and software. Dedicated hardware data plane for line rate processing of L2 and L3 traffic. This dedicated switching solution that we've chosen gives us a very rich L2 and L3 functionality. The 4 models are available, and then I was talking about the USB stick, the out-of-band network management port, and of course we have a local RJ45 console port. And one more thing worth mentioning, is that 3 of the 4 models are fanless. And when I say fanless, I mean you can open up the box. There's no fans inside, so truly fanless. The 4th unit, that's the 24-port PoE model. If depending on how much power you're drawing from that PoE, we have up to a 400-watt PoE power budget. But anyway, depending on how much power you're drawing across the 24 ports, you do need some fans. So we have 2 fans in the 24-port PoE model. Now, In our next software release, we will have a mode that you can put it into, a low PoE mode, but where the fans will not be turned on at all. So even the 24-port PoE box can be used in the fanless environment if you're not using a lot of PoE. All right, next slide. Probably my favorite slide. I'll try not to spend too much time on this slide. So Cambium Differentiation. So it's kind of fun to talk about, well, why would you buy Cambium? What's different about Cambium? Why should I not buy one of the other 10, 20 switching vendors out there? So I do want to talk to you about Cambium Differentiation, but more important, I want to talk to you about the foundation of our switch, or the fundamental components of our switch, and how we went about designing these switches. So from the very beginning, we came up with 4 themes or 4 guiding principles. And the first one is quality. And everyone talks about quality, everyone claims to have high quality. We really did put a lot of time and energy into this one. It was very important for us to come out with a switch portfolio that was dependable, reliable, and robust. The second guiding principle or theme for us when we built these switches was ease of use. And this comes in the form of a lot of software features, one of which I'm really going to highlight with some dedicated slides. But ease of use, very important for us. Easy to deploy the switches, easy to configure the switches, and easy to maintain as well. Now, easy to troubleshoot, that's another one, right? And it's not just about troubleshooting the switch. A lot of times, a customer will have problems with his network, but he doesn't really know where in the network the problem is coming from. So we want to make it easier to troubleshoot the network, not necessarily the switch. The problem might be on the switch, or the problem might be somewhere else. But this is a feature or capability that's going to evolve over time. We have some pretty cool stuff in our first release, but we're going to be adding more to that. So the easy to troubleshoot is a big one as well. The third guiding principle was we wanted to come out the door and on day one, wanted to be able to meet the requirements of anyone deploying an enterprise network. And, you know, switches have been in existence for 15, 20 years. I've been building switches at other companies for 20 years now. And there's a long list of features, but they're pretty standard. They're pretty well known. I divide up all these features into 4 categories. The L2 aspect of it, and that's kind of a basic, doesn't really need to be said, but these access switches or switches designed for the access layer of the network, L2 switching is big, and there's a long list of L2 features that we have, and definitely we can go head to head against any of our competitors. L3 switching is interesting and worth mentioning. It's not mandatory to have L3 at the edge of your network. Some switches don't have L3. Some switches will have L3, but only static routing. Our switch, we do support L3 switching, both static routing and dynamic routing. So it was a big decision, but we did make that decision when we were designing these switches. So we do support L3. Third category of features is management. You'll see switches out there that are unmanaged switches, or smart managed, or fully managed switches. For an enterprise deployment, you really want a fully managed switch. So, you know, the ability to configure all features and all sub features as well. And we are fully managed. We have a very comprehensive COI solution. So it uses a kind of a Cisco-like syntax. If you're familiar with configuring a Cisco box, a Cisco switch, you should be able to do just fine with our switches. So anyway, so we support a very comprehensive COI. We also support a web GUI. Our first version of the web GUI that's shipping now is good. It doesn't have full coverage of every feature we support, though, so we'll be adding to that in our next release. But anyway, COI, web GUI. Also, every one of our features is instrumented with an SNMP MIB. So if a customer likes using their favorite SNMP application, they can. And then the fourth category of features is security. We have a long list of security features as well. So if I kind of pause and hesitate here, our first 3 guiding principles, quality, ease of use, and being feature rich, that should be enough, right? We should be able to go out to the market and sell our switches, and you know they work so well, which I'll talk about later, with our Cambium products. But in any switching, enterprise switching deployment, these switches should do just fine. and comparing us to the other switches available in the market, very, very comparable. I'd like to argue we have higher quality, but everyone will say the same thing. On the quality, we did decide to come out with a limited lifetime warranty. So we are standing behind our quality. Other vendors do that as well. Most vendors have a standard 1-year warranty. So anyway, so high quality, ease of use, and feature rich, that's kind of the base. But on top of that, we did have some pretty innovative ideas, and so a little bit of Cambium differentiation I'll talk about next. And the first item here is intelligent edge. This is a term that we use a lot at Cambium, not just for our switches, but across all of Cambium. The intelligent edge, what that means for cnMatrix is it's really a suite of features, and I'm going to highlight 3 features for you here. The first one is policy-based automation. So what this feature does is it really gives you a true zero-touch experience, and this feature is big for us. We really think this is a game changer, and so I'm not going to talk any more about it. I have a few slides coming up that are dedicated to this one feature. The second feature is enhancing the security. So our switch, as devices connect to our switch, we will profile those devices or gather information and learn as much as we can about that switch. And based on what we learn and gather, and based on some policies that have been configured, we will auto-segment that device into the correct VLAN or VLAN. So putting them in the right network. You don't want to put, the light switch or some building infrastructure type of device onto the sensitive or secure financial network. Okay, third feature I want to highlight here is being wireless aware, and this is mainly about interacting with other Cambium devices. So all the Cambium devices today plug into a switch at one point or another. The fixed wireless devices, the Wi-Fi devices, they all plug into a switch, and they work just fine. We've been selling it that way for 10+ years. However, now that Cambium has our own switches, if you plug these Cambium wireless devices into a Cambium switch, we now own both sides of the equation, so we can add in some extra capability and some extra features. So that's a big one for us. And again, we have some cool features we've added in our first release, but this is going to evolve over time. We have a little task force that is specializing in, the cnMatrix team working with fixed wireless teams and the Wi-Fi teams, and we are adding in more functions and capability in each of our upcoming software releases. So that was the number one item, which I think is a key differentiation, shows some cool innovation. The second item I've already talked about and mentioned, and that's the fact that cnMatrix is cloud managed. Being able to be cloud managed is becoming more and more common and more required. It's very, very common for Wi-Fi devices, not as common for switches. There are switches out there that are cloud managed. Some claim that they're cloud managed and they're actually not. But there are several out there that are truly cloud managed. And just to point out, they usually charge a license, an extra license for that cloud management. Here at Cambium, with the cnMatrix portfolio, everything that I've mentioned today comes with the base price of the switch. There are no extra licenses needed. So the lifetime warranty, it comes with the base cost of the switch. Those 410 gig uplinks, we don't throttle those back to 1 gig and make you pay for a license to get the full 10 gig. It comes as a base cost. And then cnMaestro is the last example. It comes as a part of the base price. So anyway, so not only is cnMatrix cloud managed, it's cloud managed with cnMaestro. So now you have a single pane of glass for all of your Cambium devices, and the types of features and functionality that you get from cnMaestro with your other Cambium products, you'll get the same with cnMatrix. So the onboarding and registration process. For that initial deployment, you get the zero touch with an initial config file and even an initial image if you choose to. Of course, you get all the monitoring, which is probably the most commonly used aspect of cnMaestro. And again, just as a reminder, it's monitoring from a system point of view across all your switches, not just one switch. So it's not a device manager, it's a system manager. And also the monitoring, it's not just instantaneous values of statistics, it's historical values of the statistics. So you can do trending and graphing, very powerful. The next one I have listed here is configuration. So Of course, you can configure the switches with cnMaestro as well. And then the last but not least is cnMaestro has wonderful utilities for troubleshooting the network. Okay, so this slide right here, kind of a high-level view of the functionality and kind of the design guiding principles that we used when developing these switches. Moving on to the next slide, this is just a couple screenshots of cnMaestro. You know, you can drill into the details of a single switch, or you can drive in even deeper into the details of a single port if you would like. Okay, a little bit about what's next coming in the near term here. So cnMaestro, the version of software that we shipped on November 30th, I told you we've been shipping since November 30th, did not support cnMaestro. It now is available. Actually, as of this week, coincidentally, you can get the cnMatrix software version at 2.0.3-R4. That's the version that you want. It's posting this week. cnMaestro, the version that you want for cnMaestro is 2.1.1, and that also posts this week as well. So we've been giving out, you know, private versions, private images for a month or so now for people to demo and play with cnMaestro. But now it's formally and officially available to anybody. Also, what's coming in the near future is our next software release. We're going to have maintenance releases between now and then to fix any little items that come up or are reported by customers. But our next big release is coming in the July-ish timeframe, possibly June, but I'll say July to play it safe. The USB support, you know, I talked about the USB, you know, that's actually not supported in our 2.0 software. It will be supported in 2.1. The reset button, that tiny little hole that most people don't know what it is, and you stick a pin in there and you can, you know, reset to defaults if you'd like. That actually is available now. So I need to fix this slide. That is available in the image we just posted, 2.0.3. The third bullet here is the big one, right? So I talked about L3 support. So dynamic, we have static routing today. In 2.1, we will enable the WIP and OSPF dynamic routing in the 2.1 release. We're going to work on our web GUI, work on enhancing that, the look and feel, as well as adding in support for other features. And then, of course, we're going to continue to evolve cnMaestro, additional troubleshooting utilities, additional monitoring capabilities, you know, enhance the overall topology view. And that, again, I'll touch on this a few more times during the presentation, but kind of the magic trio of products for the enterprise that we have is cnPilot, which has done very well for Cambium, giving us the wireless story. But now with cnMatrix, you get the wired story, and with cnMaestro. So, you know, those three products, it really is a magic, very, very comprehensive and complete solution for the customer. Okay, next slide. Some more about what's next. So some new hardware platforms. So today we're shipping the EX platform, the enterprise platform. We have 4 models. Well, in design, we have new models coming. They'll come out later this year, 48 port version, both a PoE and a non-PoE version. There's a lot of different requirements out there as far as how much PoE power you need. Some people don't need very much at all, 300, 400 watts spread across the 48 ports. Some people want more, so 700 watts. Some people want even more than that. So I have here listed various options. This is going to be a removable power supply. And so anyway, so customers can migrate from one power supply to another, or if they have power supply failures, they don't have to swap out the whole switch. They can just swap out the power supply. So it's a pretty nice design. Next, we are going to come out with another switch that supports 2.5 gig per port. And so this is the new 802.3 BZ standard, which accounts for 2.5 gig or 5 gig over the same cabling, so over the same Cat5 infrastructure cabling that a building might have. So cnMatrix, here's the TX platform or the WISP platform. I mentioned this on the first slide, and so that this is coming soon. and then of course our video surveillance platform as well. So these next few slides, maybe the highlight for me anyway, a feature that I'm pretty passionate about, and this is the policy-based automation feature that really delivers the zero-touch experience. So I'm going to go into this in a little bit more detail. So here's a picture. It shows zero touch. So everyone talks about zero touch, but what is zero touch? It means you don't have to touch the switch. So it automates the configuration that's necessary. It doesn't mean you don't have to configure it. The switch still needs configuration, but how do you automate that configuration? So for the initial deployment of the switch, which is what most people talk about, and you plug in the switch, here's some examples on the left side here. Here's some examples of the things that you're going to want to configure on your switch for your initial deployments. Not everyone's going to use all of these, but a few examples. Some static VLANs, which ports are going to be uplink ports? Do you want to create a link aggregation? Things like that. So the question is, I connect the switch to the network, and without configuring it manually, how do you automate that? And at Cambium, we have solved that with cnMaestro. There's other ways to solve it too, but we've solved it with cnMaestro. And the important point I want to make is when you hear people talking about zero touch, 9 out of 10 of them are talking about this. How do you automate the initial deployment of your switches? However, I think this is only half of the equation. There's some other configuration that you want to automate as well. And this is the automation, or this is the configuration that is required for ongoing operations of your network. So I've listed some examples on the right. So as you connect devices into the switch, every time you connect a device, the switch needs to be configured. You need to configure VLANs, you need to configure QoS, you need to configure, whatever. So the examples I have are access points, cameras, printers, or IoT devices. So it's not, it's not just these 3 main devices. It's the thousands of IoT devices that might be out there. All of which require configuration on your switch. Now, there's other things that require configuration changes as well. So when you're removing a device, it may be even more important than when you're inserting or connecting a device. When you're removing a device, you want to clean up the configuration that's associated with that device. The config files for switches can get way out of hand and very unruly and hard to manage and hard to maintain. So cleaning up the configuration is very important for that reason. But even more importantly, it's important to clean up that configuration for security reasons. Let's say you've opened up a couple VLANs on that port for that device. Well, when you unplug that device, you want to clean up those VLANs. You don't want that port to no longer be a member of those VLANs. Okay, so how do we solve this? At Cambium, we've come up with a feature called policy-based automation. In my next slide, I'll go into a little bit more detail. So what exactly is policy-based automation? So these are user-created policies that will automate switch and port configuration. And the customer can create 1 policy or 100 policies, whatever he needs for his network deployment. These policies can be created via any management interface. cnMaestro is preferred for one reason. If you create this policy on cnMaestro, well, then cnMaestro pushes that policy to all switches in the network. So if the customer has 1 switch, or if the customer has a couple hundred switches, every one of those switches will get or can get this policy. If you use a COI or web GUI to configure these policies, and the web GUI and COI both have very powerful interfaces for configuring these policies, so you can do it. But those policies reside only on the 1 switch. So if you have a large network, you really want to do it with cnMaestro so you can push down the policies to all switches. That means that every port on every switch will be implementing the same policy. So policies, they have 2 components. The first component is the ability to match a device, or to be able to detect a device type or a device class or a user. And that is what's used for applying a policy. So if that information matches what's in the policy, then you're going to apply the actions. The actions are the second part, or the second component of the policy. And what are the actions? Well, VLANs is the best example or easiest example to talk about. For almost any device, you want to have that device have access to only one or more VLANs. So that's an important part of configuration when connecting a device. And I'll go through an example on the next slide. Other settings, QoS settings for that device. What type of quality of service would you like that device to have? What type of security items would you like associated with that device, and so on. Okay, next point. Configuration as a result of policies is dynamic. So this is when I was talking about removing devices. So when you remove a device, all that configuration that was associated with that policy will automatically get cleaned up. So if the device is removed, or if the device has been modified and it no longer matches the criteria of the policy, the configuration will also be cleaned up in that case. Or of course, if the switch powers down, all that configuration does not survive a power cycle or a reset. When the switch powers back up, the process happens all over again. Those devices will be dynamically detected, and then the policies will be reapplied again. Okay, here's an example. So let's say we want to connect an access point to a switch, and that access point is going to advertise 3 SSIDs. Let's say one SSID is for employees, one SSID is for contractors, and the third SSID is for guests. And so those 3 SSIDs need to be bound to 3 different VLANs. So in my example here, I have VLAN 40, 50, and 60. Now the native VLAN, or the PVID, in my example here, I'm setting the PVID to 40. And in this example, it's port 5. I'm plugging an access point into port 5. So I'm going to show you the COI commands that would be necessary if you did not use policy-based automation. So these COI commands, there's 10 to 15 commands here. They're pretty straightforward. They're pretty easy, but it's easy to make a typo. It's easy to make a mistake. And this is for port 5. If I want to plug in a second AP into port 7, I have to retype these. And not all the commands. We have to retype most of these again. So with policy-based automation, you don't have to type any of these commands. Instead, you just have to create this one policy. So here's the syntax if you were using the COI to create a policy. So this policy will do exactly what we need, and the policy exists for all ports. So now you can plug the access point into any port you want, and you can also plug in as many as you want. So you can plug in 5 APs and never have to type in a single line of configuration, and everything gets magically configured. It's a pretty powerful demo to give to an audience. It's a fun demo to give, because before you begin, you do a show command and you show the current configuration on the switch, and you see that there's only the default configuration that's on the switch. And then you, as a result of this policy, when you plug in a device, then you do a second show command, and all of a sudden you see pages and pages of configuration that was instantly and magically configured. The last part of the demo is when you remove that device, and then you do a third show command, all of a sudden you see all that configuration has been removed, and you're back to the default configuration only. So it's a powerful demo to give, and very powerful for the user, for the IT team. So here's kind of a summary on the policy-based automation feature. It automates the adds, moves, and changes for you. This bullet, maybe the single most important bullet, it eliminates the error-prone and timely manual configuration. So it simplifies and reduces troubleshooting. There's a statistic out there in the industry, I'm not sure if I believe it's this high, but they say 80% of network problems are due to misconfigurations. It's so easy to do. You configure port 5 for your access point, but you plug it into port 6 by accident, that type of thing. Okay, third bullet, every port is treated equal. I can plug this access point into any port I want. My video surveillance camera, I can plug it into any port I want. I can plug it into any port of any switch in my network, and and all the configuration is automated. It enhances security by auto-segmenting these devices. So for this access point, he's going to be put on VLANs 40, 50, and 60, not any other VLANs. There's no accidental configuration of putting the HVAC or the air conditioning system plugging into a port and having that accidentally be placed on the highly secure finance network. So it greatly enhances security. Little or no IT is needed for deploying these new devices. So if you're plugging in new devices in your network, these policies have already been configured. So now anybody can just plug in an access point, and there's no need to have to log in to the switch, no need to have the skills necessary to log into the switch and manually configure it. I'm not saying the IT team is obsolete and not needed. I'm not saying that at all. But the IT team, every IT team I know is overworked. So now it frees up the IT team to be doing more important activities. And overall, just to summarize, it reduces expenses required to deploy and manage the network. Okay, deployment use cases. So where do you deploy these enterprise switches? Well, this slide, I have a couple pictures of towers. So I'm not talking about the WISP switches that are coming out later. I'm talking about the enterprise switches. In some conditions, in some scenarios, the enterprise switches will work just fine in a WISP deployment. So here on the right side of the screen, I've listed kind of the major differences between our enterprise switches and our WISP switches. The enterprise switches, they do not have integrated GPS, the integrated GPS sync. They don't have this high power passive PoE that's needed by products like cnMedusa. And we also don't have a DC powered version of our enterprise switch. However, we're working on that. It's coming soon. But anyway, but if you don't need those three things in your WISP deployment, you can still use your enterprise switches. For example, in an ePMP WISP tower, picture on the left, the ePMP radios have their own integrated GPS. So you don't need the GPS signal to be coming from the switch. Also, the ePMP radios don't need the passive PoE that some of the other higher end radios need. They operate on 802.3 AFAT, so you're fine there as well. And if the ePMP deployment doesn't need a DC powered solution, then you're good to go. So the cnMatrix EX2K family can be used for these ePMP deployments. One other example is the CMM5. Not sure if the people on the phone are familiar with that product, but it's not a switch, it's a mid-span device. And that mid-span device has two responsibilities. It provides the high power PoE that cnMedusa needs. It also provides the integrated GPS sync. But if you're deploying the CMM5, it's not a switch. So you still need a switch to bundle up with it. And today, customers will grab a switch from their favorite vendor, whoever it be, Extreme or HP or whoever. But now you can use an all Cambium solution. You can use the EX, the cnMatrix EX switch family to bundle with CMM5 if you're deploying a CMM5 scenario. Okay, moving on. So this picture here, this is the real deployment scenario for our enterprise switches. I have here in this slide a 3-tier network architecture. Very, very common is also a 2-tier network architecture. It's just without the distribution layer. But we have the core network, the core layer, the distribution layer, and then you have the access layer or the edge of the network. And that's where I want to focus here, and that's what the cnMatrix switches are designed for. So at the edge of your network, you need wireless connectivity and you need wired connectivity. So cnPilot, we've had cnPilot for a few years now, selling very well, and it provides a great wireless solution for our customers. But now we have the other half of the equation, which is the wired access, so with cnMatrix. So they play very nicely together, and that's the main point of this slide is, we now have a complete and comprehensive solution for the access layer of the enterprise network. The third aspect is cnPilot, cnMatrix, and the third item is cnMaestro up in the upper right-hand corner of the slide. So those three working together, a very powerful solution for enterprise access networks. Okay, summary. So what is cnMatrix? So these are enterprise grade layer 2 and layer 3 functional switches. Cloud managed with cnMaestro, a big one. Ease of use. So true zero-touch experience for the customer, not only for the initial deployment of the switch, but also using policy-based automation for the day-to-day operations of the switch as well. Enhanced security. definitely, you know, the device profiling that we do and the auto segmenting that we do for the devices that are connecting. And then again, this complete comprehensive story that we have for the access layer, cnMatrix bundled with cnPilot with cnMaestro, a very powerful story. So if you look at all these items, you combine that with the limited lifetime warranty that we have and the very good support that Cambium is known for, it really does give you a best-in-class total cost of ownership. So that summarizes my deck for today. Hopefully the audio in the beginning, it wasn't that bad, and hopefully the audio afterwards was much better. I'm going to open up the chat window or the question window and go through some of the Q&A. And let's see, where are we? Here's the... Okay, I have the question window open. Oops, I did. Okay, there we go. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to scroll up to the top. Okay, first few comments were about the choppy voice. So now I'm down to maybe the fifth or sixth question, and the question is about SFPs. So good question. So on the 8-port model or the 2010 model, we have 2 SFPs. On the 24-port model or the EX2028, we have 4 SFP plus. So what type of SFPs do we support? So we don't have Cambium branded SFPs. The previous company I worked at and several other companies do have their own branded SFPs. You'll find that the cost is significant, multiple X times the cost you can get if you buy them directly. So we don't have a list of recommended SFPs. We do recommend that you buy from a vendor that you trust. So hopefully I answered your question, Mark. So next question, are there any plans for a 48-port switch? Yes, I believe I answered that, and that's going to be coming out towards the later second half of this year. We'll be doing a non-PUE and a PUE version. And again, on the PUE version, you know, we had trouble. Every customer I talked to wanted a different amount of PUE power budget. So that's why we're 9 out of 10 chances we're going to go with this external power supply. And it's not necessarily an external supply, it's a removable power supply that slides in and slides out of the box. So a customer can buy the power supply that fits his needs. It's also a benefit, right? If one thing is going to fail on the switch, most commonly it's the power supply. So it makes it easier to deal with failures as well. Next question. I'm having pretty bad latency on the presentation, wondering if it's my end or maybe the machine that is hosted, maybe running more apps and lagging. Thanks, I'm sorry. Hey, Vitaly, I appreciate your input, and hopefully when I switched my audio to my phone, hopefully it got better for you. So I really apologize for that. Okay. Oh, Vitaly, you responded saying much better. Very good. Okay. A few other comments about the audio did improve. Good. Okay, next question. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to everyone for your time. If anyone wants to dig deeper and find out more, absolutely, reach out to your local Cambium rep, and I'll more than happy get on a call with you and spend an hour, 2 hours all day, or come visit you or whatever. So if you want to go to the next level of detail, absolutely. Next question. Okay, I see this question from someone here. In the end, they give certificate or require payment. I am from Peru. Thank you. Translate Google. Okay, I'm actually not sure what that question is about. Maybe someone can clarify it for me. So going on to the next question. Will these be available in 10 gigabyte? Let me, yeah, so 10 gig. So on the 28 port, on the EX2028, we do have 4 10 gig SFP or fiber ports. This question might be asking, are we ever going to have 10 gig copper? And the answer is it's not on our roadmap, but I have heard a couple questions here and there. Not a big demand, but it's easy to do. It's very easy to do. So we can do it if necessary, but for now we do not have 10 gig copper band. We only have the 10 gig SFP. This question also might be, are we going to have a switch that is all 10 gig ports? So maybe a 8 port or a 12 port, all SFP plus. The idea's been talked around. It's not formally on our roadmap, but if we keep getting asked about it, we will build it. Next question. Can cnMatrix switches be managed using cnArcher app? The answer is no. We are going to integrate it into Link Planner. I know that for sure. cnArcher, it's come up. I actually have to look into that more to find out more about it. So that's an unknown. So the or higher part, that or higher question, I believe is related to the 10 gig question. So are we going to support 25 gig or 40 gig or 50 gig or 100 gig? Yeah. So, I talked about the EX2K family. Well, when we come out with our higher end version, it will cost more. When we come out with the EX3K version, there's a few things we may add, right? So I talked about, from a hardware point of view, redundant removable power supplies. That's something we would want to put into our 3K family. Maybe a larger table sizes for our routing. Today we support up to 1K routes, so we'd want to support more routes in our 3K version. Let's see. And then about this, and then our uplinks today are 10 gig uplinks. But in a higher end switch, customer may want, well, a while ago it was 40 gig. Now I think it's, people are concluding that 25 gig is the acceptable uplink for an enterprise campus deployment. But anyway, yeah. So when we come out with this EX3K family, that's when we would be adding those types of things. Do you recommend using these switch for ISP business? Yeah, I do. So if you're talking about out in the tower, the WISP switches, the WISP switches that were coming out later next year, they're more hardened. They have the integrated GPS sync. We're supporting the passive PoE for things like cnMedusa. So awesome switch, definitely plan for that. If you're talking about back in the core or back in the NOC, depending on the NOC, these switches can be used. Now these switches are not core routers. So I don't have an 8K or a 16K routing table size. I have a 1K size, which is overkill for the edge. But anyway, when we come out with the EX3K, that can go farther up into the distribution layer or core. Okay, gotta run. Thanks. Yeah, thanks again, Vitaly. Appreciate it. Next question: where the switch caps out? I'm sorry, I don't understand that question. I haven't. Here, let me highlight it. Maybe I can get more of it. Okay, so you have an issue with your current Cisco switches, and you're asking where the switch caps out. I don't really know what you mean. I'm speculating that potentially you run out of PoE power. So on our 24 port switch, we have 400 watts. It's a decent amount. 400 watts can be used, distributed across the 24 ports any way you want, right? Okay, next question. Can the switch support virtual networks deployment inside? Yes, I believe so. I used to work with some, we implemented a fabric. It was based on SPV at my previous company. So it was a virtual fabric internally. Depending on the vendor that you choose your virtual fabric from, these enterprise switches at the edge of the network can operate just fine in those environments. Okay. Next, here's a question. When are the WISP switches coming out? Q3 maybe? Yeah, maybe. I'd plan on Q4. Q4 or maybe even Q1. But Q4 is what we're looking at right now. So Q3 possibly, but most likely Q4. And in further updates as we go, we'll keep you guys posted. Next questions. For the WISP switches, AC and DC skew units. Answer is yes. Simple skew switches with an AC or DC removable swappable power supply. Okay, yeah, very good question, and we spent lots of time on this topic. What I'm about to tell you is not rock solid plans, but I'm going to tell you what I'm currently thinking. For the 8-port version, it's going to be fixed. Got an AC version, got an AC low with low power, an AC high with high power, and an AC with DC power. So those are fixed. For the 16-port version and the 24-port version, it's going to be a removable supply. So you can buy a power supply of the size that fits your needs, and those supplies can be used in either the 16-port version or the 24-port version. That's where we're at now. And again, I don't have a firm schedule or dates for you guys, so I apologize for that. Okay, I think that was the last question. Again, thanks for your time, you guys. I enjoy talking about cnMatrix. We're really excited. We've been shipping for about 60 days now. Gotten a pretty positive response. So far so good. You know, I'm really focusing on the end user now and making sure that these switches meet the requirements of the end user. And you know, it seems like a lot. We're shipping 4 switches, but we're not, right? This is the very beginning. You know, we're just the tip of the iceberg. We have these 4 switches for enterprise. We're going to be adding the 48-port and the multi-gig for the enterprise. And then we're going to be coming out with the 2 other families of switches, you know, the WISP switches, as well as the outdoor video surveillance switches as well. So that's our plan. So we'll be evolving and coming out with new software features as well as new hardware platforms. And stay tuned. I still don't see any further questions, so I think we are good to go. I am gonna end. Oh, one more. I knew there'd be one more. Okay, Samuel, go ahead. I think I'm waiting for Samuel to type in his question. Have you worked with these in a solar environment? Great question. Solar is mentioned a lot around here. We definitely want to do a solar version. The first solar version that we'll do is probably for our video surveillance switches, or outdoor video surveillance switches. The very first switch that we come out with will not support DC power. It will be an AC powered switch. But your question here and questions from many others, this does come up a lot. So our next version will most likely be a solar powered or a DC powered version that you can use in a solar environment. Okay, good. Yeah, so this is, you know, this would be an integration of a solar panel, our switch, and some type of battery backup solution. So these are the things we're discussing. Nothing formal on our roadmap yet, but absolutely we are discussing this. So I appreciate your question and your input, because it gives us more, it lets us know that people really are looking for this. So thank you. Okay, I believe that's it. So thank you again, everybody. Reach out to your local Cambium contact if you would like more information or set up a follow-up call. Okay, good enough. Great. Hey, thanks a lot for your input and your questions, Samuel. Very good. If you want to have a one-on-one sometime, just let your local Cambium contact know, and we'll set it up. Bye, everybody.